So this just might be one of the most important chapters of the entire series, because this chapter basically marks the turn from Eren being basically the series protagonist and hero into potentially being his main villain. Hey, what's up guys? Alright, so this month's chapter is actually called Liar, and the reason why it's titled that is because the main focal point of this chapter is a whole bunch of different characters coming together and having conversations on whether or not they can actually trust three characters, and those three characters are basically Zeke, Eren, and Yelena. Now, when it comes to Zeke, there isn't really much discussion when it comes to him. It's basically stemmed from a conversation in the very beginning of the chapter between him and Levy, where the main part of the conversation, or the main conclusion of the conversation, is the fact that they both kind of agree that the military higher-ups are dragging their feet on whether or not they're actually going to let him meet with Eren, and they're running out of time. Although, from this conversation between the two of them in the very beginning of the chapter, we actually did end up finding out some pretty important and pretty interesting information. And that's basically how Zeke is able to control other Titans, despite the fact that he doesn't have the Founding Titan abilities. And what we end up finding out is that basically when Zeke attacked, I believe it was Ragok Village a few years ago in the series, he used the gas that actually contained his own spinal fluid inside of it. And what we find out is that basically this gas, if it's ingested even a little bit by people of Ymir, it will knock them unconscious and put a marker inside them. And that marker basically gives Zeke the ability to change the people into Titans whenever he wants to on command, and basically force them to do whatever he does tell them to do. Which is the reason why we actually saw in previous parts of the series when he was attacking Paradise Island that he had Titans doing his bidding, despite the fact that they are just normal Titans, not, Titan shifters who are capable of thought. Now, this is actually very dangerous information, and there are two reasons why this is dangerous. The first reason why this information is actually so dangerous is because of the fact that we now have solid evidence that you don't have to have the Founding Titan ability in order to control other Titans. Now, we don't know if this is an ability that stemmed from the Beast Titan, or if it comes from the fact that Zeke is of royal blood, or if this is just something that every Titan shifter can actually do. Which is actually the most dangerous question, because if every Titan shifter can do this, this puts a brand new danger on the table, because now, especially since Marley already has perfected this technology, they can use basically any Titan shifter they have left available to them, which is basically the Car Titan, the Jaw Titan, and the Armor Titan, if Reiner actually is on board with their plans, to come in and basically turn any village they want to, any town they want to, into a town full of Titan shifters that they can basically control. So that's a whole army for them to control without anyone actually being able to do anything, since Eren has no full control over the Founding Titan abilities. And the other reason why this information is actually so dangerous is because in the chapter, the most important question brought up is whether or not Zeke was actually able to use this ability, use this gas, to control Eren. Because we have no idea, no one has any idea exactly what happened to Eren all those months that he was on Marley. Even us as the readers have no information exactly what happened to him. We're all in the dark. So it's actually not that unbelievable that if Zeke is actually able to control other Titan shifters through them ingesting his spinal fluid, that he might actually have been able to control Eren. And this actually stems into one of the reasons why it's actually being called into question whether or not they can actually trust Eren. Because while he's in the jail cell and he's being questioned by the military about his time on Marley, he's not saying anything. He's staying silent. And the fact that he's actually not, answering their questions kind of brings up the fact that, maybe he actually is being controlled. Maybe Zeke and him actually do have some kind of ulterior motives in the works. And they're actually not working in the best favor of Paradise Island, of the Eladians. So it's, completely understandable that the military at this point don't trust them. And, speaking about the military, is it just me, or do the higher-ups in the military seem to be acting the same way that the previous higher-ups before Historia became queen were acting? Which is kind of weird because, ever since we got into this 4-year time skip, they've been acting pretty much the same way that the, previous rulers or the previous heads of the military and the government were acting. With, the fact that they are basically forcing Historia into, becoming a time shifter. And the fact that we find out in this chapter that they have already, put plans into motion of replacing Eren as a Founding Titan and finding someone suitable that they can actually control as a replacement. I don't know, I kind of find it odd the fact that, the current military heads, the current heads of the government, basically rebelled against the previous heads because of the fact that they were doing shady behind the scenes stuff that were basically in the benefit of themselves and not the regular people. But now we have them doing the exact same thing. So was it just me, or did Yelena seem a little bit off in this chapter? Like, she seemed a little bit out of character from what we've seen of her so far. I don't know, maybe it just stemmed from the fact that, her conversation with Picto, she seemed a little more docile, a little more, apologetic than I would normally see her as. Usually she seems a little stoic, usually like, not above everyone else, but it seems like she's usually 2 steps ahead. But in this chapter, it seems like she was kind of backed into a corner, or like a little kind of like a trapped rat. But at the same time, maybe this actually was her plan in the long run, because at the end of the conversation between her and Pixa mentions the fact that she's kind of a bad liar, and sometimes she needs to mix the truth in with her lies. So I'm not exactly sure if that was basically commentary that he knows that her entire conversation of her trying to take blame for her actions and not get the other volunteers involved was basically her putting up a front, or. But we do end up finding out more information about Yelena in the chapter, and it's actually because of the fact that she's actually the main driving point, or kind of main focal point of the chapter, or at least her actions indirectly are. And one of the things we actually end up finding out from her through her conversation from Pixiv actually, is that Yelena's kind of a religious zealot when it comes to Eren and Zeke. She kind of sees the two of them as messiahs who will change the world. And she's willing to do pretty much anything in order to help them achieve that goal, even sacrifice her own life. And this is actually kind of brought forward even more when we see Hanji talking to, I forget what the guy's name is, I can't actually pronounce it, but the black soldier who's been part of the volunteers. When we actually end up finding out exactly how Yelena not only recruited him, but all the other members of the volunteers, we see that it was basically her devotion to Zeke, which is so charming to them, that she was able to talk them into basically joining up with his secret army. And she would not only recruit people who are being basically enslaved by the Norwegians, but also half Norwegians in themselves, and sometimes even Norwegians who were, full Norwegian, who just kind of agreed with their ideals. And even though she would bring in half and full Norwegians into the military, into Zeke's private army, if any question of their trust was brought up, if there was any doubt brought up of whether or not she was trustworthy, or if any of the Norwegians were trustworthy, she would kill them on the spot without hesitation. And the fact that she was actually willing to kill Norwegians without any hesitation, even the ones that are actually working with them, is what actually brings into question whether or not she's actually trustworthy or not. Because when we actually find out more information about her, we found out that she was actually the one who actually was advocating and fighting against basically the Survey Corps and all the other military higher-ups in favor of the Norwegians being, not being treated as prisoners of war, but actually giving them rights, giving them, kind of like giving them jobs, or basically letting them be kind of second-class citizens. And you know what? By the end of the chapter, I was questioning exactly what's going to be up with her character going on. Because at this point, even the volunteers that were working under her don't fully trust her anymore. So I'm kind of wondering what her character is going to do from now on. Now that she's kind of backed into a corner of, not being trusted by anyone. We get a brief moment where we actually get to see Armin going to see Annie again. Which, by the way, just with the amount of attention that Annie's been getting lately, ever since we got through this whole 4-year time skip, there is no question in my mind that she's coming back soon. It's just a matter of when, what chapter is going to be. But I have no doubt that she's actually going to be coming back in the near future. Possibly, sooner than we think, based on something that happens at the end of the chapter, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Anyway, while he's trying to have his moment with Annie, he actually ends up getting interrupted by Hitch, who is the current guard at that moment of Annie's crystal. The two of them walk away for a little bit, they're talking about the situation that's going on. And then, while they're actually heading towards the main building, or like the headquarters of the higher-ups of the military, we see this giant mob of just regular civilians who, have found out the fact that, Eren is being held captive, and that the volunteers who have been working with, the military police and the Survey Corps and everyone else are being, held prisoner as well. They all, like this giant mob, comes to the gates and are demanding for their release. They're demanding for Eren's release. They're screaming that Eren is the one and only savior of the audience, and that he's their only hope. And they're just basically being fanatics at this point. They're basically treating Eren the same way Yelena's treating Eren and Zeke. Basically treating him as a religious figure at this point, and that he's their one and only savior. They're kind of treating him like Jesus. But anyway, while all that's going on, we actually see Mikasa meet up with Armin, and the two of them actually head to Commander Zaku's office because they have a meeting with him about, getting permission to go and talk to Eren. Which basically the conversation stems down to, no, we can't trust Eren, so we're not going to let you meet him. And this is actually when we end up finding out after they leave the conversation with him, and we see a few other military higher-ups go join his office, that we find out that basically they are planning secretly to replace Eren as the Founding Titan. Now, Mikasa right away wants to go in there and listen in on the conversation. She's like, I'm going to be sneaky about it. Don't worry about Armin. I'm not going to get caught. But if they are trying to replace Eren, we get to know ahead of time. But right before she can even get in there, the room actually ends up exploding. The entire room that the 4 people, or the 5 of them were in, explodes. and we see a scene of Zachary's body, his charred, like, this disgusting mangled body, come flying out of a hole in the wall. I mean, seriously, his body after the explosion looked like something out of The Walking Dead. It was that disgusting. Then we get to see a scene of basically where all the higher ups in the military and Mikasa and Armin and I guess the second in command of the volunteers are sitting around, and basically they're holding an investigation about exactly what could have caused Zaku's death and who was behind it. Now, immediately they actually kind of rule out, or they kind of bring up the fact that the cause of death was a bomb that was hidden in a chair inside Zaku's office. And once that's brought up, Armin remembers the chair because during him and Mikasa's conversation with Zachary kind of stops the conversation in mid-tracks and basically just stares at the chair for a little bit. And when one of them brings up, what's up with the chair, he says, oh, that's just an old chair that I didn't know what to do with anymore, so yeah, I had some Survey Corp recruits bring the chair into my office. Now, immediately, once that's actually mentioned, Armin brings it up. He tells them that some Survey Corp recruits, he doesn't know what their names are, but the fact that they were the ones who actually brought the chair into the office. Now, of course, the obvious thing is the fact that, these recruits are now being brought up as the possible suspects for the death of Zachary and the other members of the higher up military that were in his office at the time. But since they don't know their names, they can actually bring them any charges to them. They can only, Mikasa and Armin only got a quick glimpse of them as they were entering his office. So they have no way to really identify them. But here's the question, though, and here's the question I had after reading the chapter, or reading this part of the chapter. Why was Zachary paying so much attention to the chair if he didn't know the bomb was in there? Like, the way Zachary was treating that chair, the way he actually stopped the conversation to look at the chair for a little bit, and the fact that he was the one that actually requested the recruits to bring the chair into his office, makes me think that maybe Zachary was actually in on the entire plan. Like, maybe Zachary planned to sacrifice himself in the explosion so that the military higher-ups will be distracted, because right when they're having a conversation about the fact that Zach was dead, and the fact that, these Survey Corps recruits were the ones who brought the chair into his office, we end up finding out that Eren has escaped from his cell. And it wasn't just Eren who escaped. It was also Foch and the other recruits that we actually saw get arrested for leaking information to the public about Eren's arrest in, I believe, like 2 or 3 chapters ago. They all end up meeting up after we find out they got escaped. They end up meeting up. And we see that basically Foch and the recruits see Eren the same way Yelena sees him. Basically as like a religious figure, or like the only savior that they have at this moment. So yeah, the chapter ends with basically Eren and his followers going off to figure out exactly where Zeke is being held so they can free him and I guess enact the next part of their plan. And also right after that we cut to basically Mikasa, Armin, Hanji, and one other member of the volunteers that was with her. Basically they're on a cart, they're discussing exactly, Eren's escape. And while they're driving by, we see that the Cartine Peak has actually already infiltrated Paradise Island. So that means within the next 2, maybe 3 chapters, we'll actually finally start the invasion of the Marleysians invading Paradise Island in retaliation to them invading, obviously Marley. Now I gotta say, I'm actually really interested in seeing where Eren's character goes from this point on, because this character has made such a huge shift from where it was in the beginning of the series. Because in the beginning of the series, yeah, he was angry, yeah, he was quick to fight with people, but he was still pretty much human, as compared to where he is now, where he's basically just like this anti-hero, this dark hero, who is willing to make any type of sacrifice as long as it gets him to achieve his goal that much quicker. I mean, think back to like in the beginning of the series, even when Annie, Bertold, and Reiner each 3 of them were outed as a time shifter, he still wanted to believe in them. He still wanted to work things out with them and not fight them because they were his friends. But now we're to the point where Eren's willing to sacrifice his friends to achieve his goals. I mean, just look at what happened with Sasha. He has not shed a tear or even showed any remorse about the fact that Sasha died in his evasion that he forced the military to do. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing exactly what's going to happen with his character later on. Because we're at a crossroads also with Mikasa. Mikasa's basically at the point where she has to decide if she's going to follow Eren along, down the path that he's going, or if she's going to go on her own path and actually go against Eren at this point, if he does end up working against the betterment of, the Eladians in Paradise Island, which could lead to a confrontation between the two of them where they might actually have to fight. And in that situation, I gotta say I'm rooting for Mikasa more than Eren at that point, but hopefully it doesn't come to that. And I'm also really interested in seeing actually what ends up happening with Gabby, especially now that the Marlesian invasion is actually starting up. Because one thing that she was basically saying is that she was waiting for the Marlesians to come and rescue her and Falco. But now, as of last chapter, she is starting to believe the fact, or starting to realize the fact that the Marlesians weren't exactly truthful about the Paris Island people, about the people of Ymir, about the fact that they were all demons. She's starting to realize that they're not the evil creatures, or they're not the evil people that she was led to believe her entire life. And she's pretty much at a crossroads where she's going to have to decide whether or not she's going to continue to believe in the Marlesians and believe their words, or if she's going to realize that basically they have been lying to her entire life, and decide to side with the Lydians and the people from Paris Island, the people of Ymir, instead. So yeah, I'm actually really interested in seeing exactly what ends up becoming. So yeah, I'm really interested in seeing exactly what ends up becoming of her with this whole invasion arc that's about to start. But yeah, that's it for the video. That's it for the review. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like. Subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. Comment down below with your thoughts and theories. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace.